Abani met Alex at 22, when she was a brand new bank teller, and he was a dreamer with 1,000 ideas and an empty wallet. In a tiny diner under warm yellow lights, they traded futures across a wobbly table. He raved about an app that would change the game. She quietly shared her dream of launching a fashion label rooted in African craft. Two dreams sat side by side, looking like they'd grow up together. Life tilted to one side. By day, Abani hustled behind the counter. By night, she cooked, cleaned, did laundry, brewed coffee for Alex as he coded till dawn. When rent came up short, she sold the earrings her mother had given her. When his laptop died, she pawned her only watch. "If you rise, we rise," she'd say. No one heard the soft click of her own dream going into a drawer. The dusty laptop in the back room could attest. The app took off. Interviews, panels, galas. Money arrived fast. Fame faster. The higher Alex climbed, the smaller Abani became in his world. On stage, he beamed. Beside him, she stood a half step back, the blank backdrop behind a keynote speaker. At first, he introduced her as my wife, then someone who helped early on. Then he stopped saying her name. The new people in his new life looked through her like glass. No one knew who paid the first gas bill, who stayed up when the app crashed, who held his hand when the numbers tanked. Those little facts don't make headlines. One night, as she carried a tray through a roaring event hall, she heard laughter spike. Alex's voice, light, careless, landed the joke. Ani was just a phase. The circle erupted. No one noticed the woman with the tray, still as a shadow. The word fell like a stone into the deepest, quietest part of her. She didn't cry, didn't argue. She set the tray down, bowed politely, stepped onto the balcony, and checked what inside her was still intact. He came home late. The door clicked. His phone went on speaker. A friend laughed. Alex said, smooth and cold, "Abani's sweet, but I deserve someone on my level." At the hallway threshold, she stood very still. Her heart didn't shatter. It shut, neat and firm, like a steel door. She turned away and walked to the small room at the very end, the one with the battered desk, the old chair, and the dusty laptop. She tugged the curtain, flicked on the lamp. The tiny tack of the switch lit a warm circle. The screen woke slowly. Buried in a mess of folders, one name glowed, Dreams by Abani. Her finger hovered, then clicked. Sketches bloomed, colors bright, cuts sharp, motifs that told stories of seasons and craft, of her mother, and of women who never need to shout to be heard. She sat up straighter. Her spine felt like it slid back into its right groove. Out in the living room, Alex kept talking. In the little workroom, her heartbeat changed tempo. She opened new tabs. How to start an online shop, artisan textile printing, zero-budget marketing. Night slipped through the window like a black cat. She began to type. Not for revenge, not to prove a point, because she remembered who she'd been, and still was. Near dawn, she closed the laptop and rested her head against the chair. No fireworks. No applause. Just a promise to herself, said softly enough for only her to hear. I'll go quiet, and go far. Outside, the city changed shifts. Inside, an old dream rose like the sun, needing no announcement. In the hallway, a half-finished dress swayed on a hook in the draft. Nodding yes. Abani stood, folded the hurt small, tucked it in a drawer beside that first gas bill. Silence would no longer mean surrender. It was about to become power. And from this moment on, she would write the story. By day, Abani was the polite ghost of Alex's success, smiling at the right people, nodding through the right speeches. By night, she became a storm behind a locked door. Coffee went cold beside pattern books. YouTube tabs taught grading, margins, taxes. A thrift store singer rattled like a subway car at 2 a.m. She ordered deadstock fabric from a warehouse in Jersey, learned to cut around flaws, and stitched until her fingers pricked red. She picked a name that didn't sound like a person at all. ABN Studio. Sleek, neutral, untraceable. She spun up a Shopify site, a clean Instagram grid, and a tiny logo that felt like a whisper with a backbone. The first drop: 3 skirts, 2 jackets, 1 dress, bold prints, smart tailoring, no apologies. She posted at midnight, heart drumming like a snare. Nothing. Then, at 6:42 a.m., a ping. Is this handmade? Ping. Do you ship to Atlanta? Ping. Girl, this pattern, add to cart. By the time Alex shuffled to the kitchen complaining about soy creamer, she'd shipped 2 orders and answered 12 DMs. She tucked the packages in a canvas tote and slipped out, past the bodega cat and the bus stop steam, to stand in line at the post office before work. On her return, Alex was recording his podcast. Look, most girl boss stuff is cosplay, he said, laughing into a microphone. Startups are war. Costumes don't win wars. His co-host cackled. Abani rinsed a coffee mug and let the water run an extra beat, just long enough to keep her face out of sight. The nights stacked. She learned to steam press seams flat, to write product copy that sounded like confidence, to schedule posts for peak hours. A micro-influencer in D.C. bought a jacket and tagged ABN Studio. Orders tripled. A boutique in Brooklyn asked for a meeting. She sent samples by courier with a handwritten note signed only ABN. The owner wrote back, "Whoever you are, keep going." She reinvested everything. No dinners out, no splurges, no new shoes. She paid a local seamstress, Ms. Joy, who ran a side shop out of her living room, to help finish hems on rush orders. They worked shoulder to shoulder in companionable silence, a late-night jazz station crackling through a cheap radio. When Ms. Joy asked what ABN stood for, Abani smiled. "A promise," she said. 18 months taught her a new religion: consistency. Post, pack, ship, sleep, answer politely, refund fast, fix what's wrong before anyone asks. The brand grew into a feeling. Women sent photos in ABN outfits with captions like, "Interview nailed," and "I wore this to tell him no." Abani printed each one and taped it to the wall above her machine. It became a collage, a vision board made of other people's victories. At events, Alex kept performing the role of visionary. On one panel, he quipped, "My wife's supportive. She knows her lane." The room chuckled. Abani smiled at a waiter and asked for sparkling water. She had a prototype folded in her tote, seams basted, future already humming. The first big check arrived on a gray Tuesday. A wholesale order from the Brooklyn boutique with terms that made her dizzy. She stared at the number until it blurred, then exhaled a laugh that wasn't quite a laugh, more like relief escaping. She texted Ms. Joy a single line. "We did it." They high-fived over FaceTime, pixelated and giddy. That night she celebrated the only way she knew. She bought a better iron, and still, she told no one. The following week, she did something she hadn't done in years, packed Alex's favorite lunch and took it to his office. Not to win him back, to test herself. Could she stand in the old life and feel new? The receptionist glanced up, puzzled, then buzzed her through. Abani stepped into the glass and steel corridor that smelled like money and cologne. She found his floor, his door, open, and froze. A woman sat at his desk, feet up, scrolling his phone. She wore a fitted dress Abani might have designed if she'd been meaner to fabric. Her hand rested absently on a small, unmistakable curve. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, smiling the way people smile right before they bite. "I brought lunch for Alex," Abani said, voice steady. The smile widened to something cruel. "You must be the wife," she said lightly. "He told me you were a sick cousin." The bag rustled in Abani's hand. For a second she couldn't hear, couldn't feel her arms. Then everything snapped into perfect cold focus. The panels, the jokes, the nights, the work. She nodded once. "Thank you," she said, though for what she wasn't sure. She turned, walked past the glass awards and the framed magazine covers, pressed the elevator button with a finger that didn't shake. On the sidewalk, the city breathed heat up through the grates. She took out her phone, scrolled to a contact she'd saved months ago and never used. When the attorney answered, Abani's voice was quiet and exact. "It's time," she said. "Understood," came the reply. "We'll file first thing in the morning." Abani hung up, tightened her grip on the lunch bag, and tossed it into a trash can on the corner. A bus roared by. In a second-floor window 2 blocks down, a mannequin wore a dress that looked like courage. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow I stop being quiet for him and keep being quiet for me. Hook first. The morning Abani filed, New York smelled like burnt coffee and wet concrete, the city's way of telling you to keep moving. She did. She took the queue downtown, portfolio on her lap, wedding ring in her pocket like a coin she no longer needed to spend. Grace Chen's office overlooked Foley Square. No inspirational quotes, no soft lighting, just case files and a view of the courthouse steps. "You're sure?" Grace asked, pen poised. "Once we serve, the performance starts. He'll make noise." "I've lived with his noise," Abani said. "I'm done living under it." They mapped a plan like a pattern on muslin. Clean lines, no wasted cuts. Grace formed ABN Studio LLC on paper, backdated to the date Abani registered the trademark. Business bank account, EIN, supplier contracts in the brand's name, not hers. No hiding, just structure. "We won't weaponize this," Grace said. "We'll protect it. You don't want alimony, and you're not asking for his equity. That calm will scare him more than rage." That night, Abani moved her machine to a small sublet near the garment district, a 4th-floor walk-up that smelled like steam and starch. Ms. Joy arrived with a rolling suitcase full of notions and a thermos of peppermint tea. They pressed seams and built inventory, sleeves blooming like bright flags along a rack. At midnight, Abani emailed the Brooklyn boutique. Confirmed. At 1:07 a.m., Grace texted a single line. Summons drafted. Preferred place to serve? "His favorite stage," Abani typed back. "The podcast taping." The serve was almost elegant. A live audience, ring light glare, Alex in a bomber jacket saying things like, "Discomfort breeds greatness." The process server waited until intermission, walked up the aisle and held out the manila envelope with both hands. "Mr. Grant, you've been served." A ripple, then a hush. Alex smirked like it was a prank, flipped through the papers and looked for a camera. "My wife is confused," he told the crowd. "She's emotional." A few awkward laughs. The server dipped and disappeared. Abani, watching the live stream on her phone from a cutting table dusted with chalk, didn't flinch. She simply muted the feed and went back to pinning a hem. Within hours, Alex's texts stacked like invoices no one intended to pay. "We can talk. You're blowing this up for nothing. Be smart." When those didn't land, he switched lanes. "You can't survive without me," she sent one reply. "Please direct all communication to counsel." Then she slid her ring across the studio table until it clicked against a jar of buttons and stayed. He escalated where he always felt strongest. Optics. Instagram story. A shot of a whiskey glass. The caption, "New Beginnings." A podcast monologue about gratitude for lessons. A subtle dig on Twitter about people who confuse hobbies with companies. The algorithm applauded. Abani didn't. She was busy booking a short-term production run with a small factory in Newark and onboarding a part-time fulfillment clerk who knew how to coax miracles out of corrugated boxes. In the quiet between tasks, grief arrived like a cut you don't feel until you see blood. The memory of Alex at 24, barefoot on a queen's balcony, promising her a life they'd build together. The way he used to listen before he learned to perform. She didn't swat the grief away. She set it beside the fabric scraps and let it sit while she worked. It faded, the way steam fades from a pressed seam. The first hearing came fast. Alex breezed into the corridor in Navy suit confidence, nodded at a venture capitalist he recognized, then saw Abani in a simple black dress with a legal pad and no jewelry. He laughed under his breath. "We really doing this?" he said. "We are," she answered, voice even. Inside, his lawyer performed muscle, motions, objections, theatrics. Grace countered with receipts, incorporation documents, sales ledgers, supplier affidavits. The judge, tired but sharp, lifted her glasses. "Ms. Grant, are you seeking spousal support?" "No, Your Honor." A beat. The courtroom always notices the absence of appetite. Alex blinked. This didn't fit his script. After, on the courthouse steps, the wind cut down Lafayette like a reprimand. Alex caught up to her. "You want to embarrass me? Fine. But don't burn what we built." Abani met his eyes. "We didn't build the same thing," she said. "You built a brand on your voice. I built one on my work." He scoffed, but his gaze flicked, just once, to the folder under her arm, where a bold ABN peeked from the tab. Curiosity is a crack. She didn't widen it. She turned toward Worth Street, toward the subway, toward bolts of fabric and emails and a wall of customer photos waiting to be added to the collage. That night, Grace emailed, "Financial disclosures due. He'll have to open the books." Abani stared at the screen, at the line that would soon force Alex to list assets and debts, hype and holes. Cliffhanger. 2 days later, a brown envelope arrived at Grace's office. Alex's disclosures. Page after page, numbers, valuations, and one-line item that made Grace call immediately, voice low, urgent. "Abani," she said, "you need to come in, right now. You're going to want to see this." Hook first. The brown envelope looked ordinary, cheap clasp, postage smudged, until Grace slid it open and the air in her office changed. "Sit," she said, already flipping pages. Numbers, entities, notes in tidy legalese. Alex's financial disclosure. Assets, options, 3 LLCs with predictably macho names, Grant Capital Wine, Anchor Street Ventures, AFG Media, debt, too, a ballooning line of credit tied to his podcast studio, a Mercedes he didn't need, a Hamptons rental he called content. Then Grace's finger stopped midway down page 7. "Intangible acquisitions," she read, eyes sharpening. "Trademark, ABN TM, pending. Applicant, Grant IP Holdings, LLC, filing fees paid." The room tightened around the single sentence. He tried to file for my mark, Abani said, the words dry in her mouth. Grace pulled up the USPTO search on her laptop. There it was in black and white. ABN, standard characters. Owner, Grant IP Holdings, LLC, specimen. A screenshot of ABN's homepage with the owner's name cropped out. Filing date, 2 weeks after he was served. That's not all, Grace added, dragging another email into view. A cease and desist letter Alex's counsel had blasted to their Shopify platform and Instagram. Our client owns ABN. Your client is infringing. Remove at once. A platform notice sat in Abani's inbox she hadn't opened yet, sterile and devastating. We've received a trademark claim regarding your shop. Access may be limited while we review. For a second, the only sound was the radiator knocking like an old heart. Abani inhaled, held. So this is the move, she said. He couldn't make me ask for alimony, so he's trying to steal my name. Not if we beat him to the courthouse, Grace said, already dialing. We're filing a TRO and a petition to oppose at the TTAB. He doesn't get to choke your revenue because he's better at press releases. By 4 p.m., Grace had drafted an emergency application. Declarations from suppliers, time-stamped invoices, screenshots of Abani's first e-commerce listing, predating Alex's application by 18 months. Sales ledgers. The original email confirmation from her USPTO intent to use filing under ABN Studio LLC. Ms. Joy arrived with a shoebox of hand-labeled hang tags, dated with Sharpie. The analog proof no one expects will matter until it does. At 6:40, as they stapled exhibits, Shopify pulled ABN's checkout pending verification. Orders froze mid-cart. The little green dots, customers live on site, dimmed one by one. Abani braced her hands on the table. We ship out of Newark at 9. If we miss it, we eat the postage and the goodwill. She wasn't crying. She was counting, triaging. That's what people do who've built something with their hands. Alex posted at 7:12, protecting our brand. An artfully lit boomerang of him signing something, a caption about standing up to counterfeiters. Comments came fast, his chorus clapping on cue. Grace didn't touch her phone. Let him perform, she said, sliding the TRO packet into a Redwell. We'll go where applause doesn't matter. They made it to 60 Center Street just before the clerk's window closed. The night judge took the papers home. The hearing was set for 9 a.m. Sleep didn't. Abani lay in the sublet on sheets that smelled faintly of starch, hearing upstairs pipes and the city's metallic lullaby. She thought of the first time she'd written ABN in a notebook, 3 letters that felt like a spine. She rolled onto her side, saw the garment rack in the glow of the streetlight, sleeves waiting like open hands. Morning was all fluorescent hallways and thin coffee. Alex arrived with a different lawyer. IP-heavy, horn-rimmed glasses, confident half-smile. He nodded at Abani like she was late to her own story. Alex didn't look at her. He looked through her, past her, to the courtroom where he believed gravity favored him. Inside, the judge flipped through the filings. Counsel, she said to Grace, tell me why I should restrain the respondent from asserting rights he claims to hold. Grace stood easy, voice low but carrying. Because he doesn't hold them. Because the law protects prior use. Because my client's brand predates his filing by 1.5 years, and he knows it. He just thinks he can outpace her with process. She tapped a page. Also because his application includes a specimen he harvested from her site, scrubbed of attribution. That's not good faith. It's theft dressed as paperwork. Alex's lawyer did his performance. Marital enterprise, he said, spreading his hands. He provided audience, platform, strategy. The mark itself, 3 letters, is generic. We filed to consolidate and professionalize. 3 letters that happen to be my client's initials, Grace cut in. Used consistently on labels, receipts, and in commerce since well before he tried to co-opt them. The judge turned to Alex's counsel. Why freeze her shop? Why not litigate the question without strangling her cash flow? Your Honor, we have a duty to protect consumers from confusion. The judge's eyebrows lifted a millimeter. From the person selling under the name First. For the first time, Alex glanced at Abani. There wasn't triumph on her face, just focus, like someone tracing a seam with an iron so it would lie flat, because that's how garments fit and last. Climax. The judge set her pen down. I'm prepared to rule on the TRO. The courtroom quieted until the ventilation sounded like wind. But before I do, I have a question about these disclosures. She held up page 7, the page that bit back. Mr. Grant lists intangible acquisitions, ABN as an asset, and, 2 lines down, contingent liabilities, personal guarantees tied to AFG Media's line of credit. She looked over her glasses at Alex's table. Counsel, explain why your client pledged a company he doesn't own as collateral for a loan. Silence. Then the soft thud of Alex's confidence falling a few inches. The judge capped her pen. We'll take 5 minutes. When we return, I'll rule. In the corridor, Grace leaned toward Abani without looking like she did. He used your name to secure his debt. That's not consolidation. That's desperation. She squeezed Abani's elbow once. Breathe. We're almost through. They filed back in. The judge lifted the TRO, the paper crisp, the edges sharp. On the application of the petitioner, she began, voice steady. The court hereby grants the temporary restraining order. The sentence landed like a gavel before the gavel. Alex's lawyer blinked. Grace didn't. The judge kept reading, crisp as a starched collar. Respondent and anyone acting with him are enjoined from asserting trademark rights in ABN or interfering with petitioner's commerce pending hearing on the preliminary injunction. Platforms that paused petitioner's store upon respondent's notice shall restore access forthwith. And, counsel, she lifted page 7 again. Your client will produce within 7 days the loan documents where ABN was listed as collateral, including personal guarantees and communications with the lender. If I smell gamesmanship, I will consider sanctions. The gavel finally came down. A guard opened the side door. Air returned to the room. In the hallway, Alex started to say something, some hybrid of charm and menace. But a clerk slid past him with the signed order tucked under a rubber band. Process outran personality for once. Grace and Abani hustled down the stairs, TRO scanned by the time they hit Center Street. By the curb, Ms. Joy had a duffel bag of pre-packed orders and the haunted look of someone who'd counted refunds at 3 a.m. Grace texted the platform counsel a PDF and 1 sentence. Order attached. Restore immediately. 10 minutes later, the little green dots on the analytics page lit up again like a runway at night. Go, Grace said, shooing them. Fulfillment first. We'll celebrate on the other side of tracking numbers. Back at the studio, the printer sang. Stickers, pick slips, that satisfying rip of craft tape. Ms. Joy called labels in a steady rhythm. A seamstress who'd come in on her day off did a blessing she learned from her grandmother, hand hovering over a stack of boxes. Outside, a guy from the deli 2 doors down held the door while the first wheelie cart squeaked out. At 12:03, Abani posted 3 words on the brand account. "We're still here. No hashtags, no subtext." Customers flooded the comments with receipt emojis. Someone screenshotted the TRO and tagged Alex's podcast. For once, his replies were quieter than hers. By mid-afternoon, Grace was back in Abani's office with an espresso and a whiteboard. "Short game. Keep you selling. Land the preliminary injunction. Hammer the TTAB opposition," she said, dotting each box. "Long game. Equitable distribution, misleading the court, and whatever he did with that loan." She circled collateral like it was a suspect. If he pledged ABN to secure AFG Media's line, that's a covenant problem. We subpoena the bank. If they relied on a misrepresentation, they'll either call the note or flip to save face. Either way, we get paper. Abani nodded, eyes on the rack by the window, the pleated skirts that had paid January rent, the satin bombers she'd pattern graded at 3 a.m., the dress that sold out in 13 minutes because a mid-tier pop star had worn it without tagging, and the internet became a detective. "What about the financials?" she asked. "He keeps waving around valuations." Grace smiled, small and ferocious. "Valuation cut both ways. He bragged in disclosure. Now we make him open the books. Revenue, burn, sponsorship clawbacks, that Hampton's content lease. New York's equitable distribution cares about fair more than flash." Her phone buzzed. She glanced, then laughed through her nose. "He posted again," she said, handing it over. Alex's story, a black and white selfie captioned, "Silence is complicity," over a block of text about protecting creators from copycats. Under it, a link to a merch drop. Abani didn't bother rolling her eyes. "He's fundraising off a loss." "Let him," Grace said. "Rhetoric doesn't survive PDFs." At 4:30, a messenger slid a thick envelope through their slot. Lender responses to the subpoena Grace had fired off the minute the TRO was signed. Not everything yet, but enough to frame the picture. AFG Media's revolving line, tied to ad revenue projections that looked brave even in good quarters. A collateral schedule stapled to the back where someone, Alex or a harried associate, had typed ABNTM next to brand IP, then scrawled to be assigned in blue pen. Grace tapped the pen note. "He tried to use you to paper over a ratio. That's why he rushed the trademark filing. When the bank asked, 'Do you own it?' he said, 'Soon.'" "And now?" Abani asked. "Now a bank lawyer is reading the TRO and wondering if they've got a default event." Grace capped her marker. "People who think they're chess grandmasters forget pawns can jam the board." Evening slid down the brick across the street. The last cart rolled back from the shipper, empty and rattling. Ms. Joy hung her apron and leaned on the counter. "He thought we'd fold," she said, not to anyone in particular. "He never watched you sew." Abani unlocked the tiny office safe and pulled out a plain manila folder. Her own numbers. Quiet accounts opened under ABN Studio LLC when she still kept the label under the bed. A quarterly P&L marked up in pencil. Tax vouchers paid on time. Not a fortune, not yet, but real. Clean. "That judge will read these too," Grace said gently, as if she'd read Abani's mind. "When this moves from injunction to distribution, the paper will tell a story. His story. Leverage and image. Yours. Margin and patience. Juries and judges believe paper." Abani ran a thumb along the folder's edge. She felt tired to the bone and strangely light. The things she'd built had been threatened in daylight and had survived daylight. Not by begging. By filing, shipping, showing up. Her phone rang, unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. A text followed, the preview peeking up on her lock screen. We should talk. It's about the bank. Grace's eyes flicked up. Who? Alex? Ms. Joy guessed. Abani shook her head, pulse quickening as the sender's name finally registered. It wasn't Alex. It was the lender. Abani let the text sit on the glass like a moth. We should talk. It's about the bank. Caller ID. Northridge Commercial Council. Grace didn't flinch. Put them on speaker. A clipped voice arrived with elevator hiss in the background. Ms. Adebayo, I'm Priya Patel, Deputy GC at Northridge. We've reviewed this morning's order. A beat. We'd like to resolve any misunderstanding about our collateral. Great, Grace said, velvet over steel. You claimed a lien on ABNTM based on respondents' representations. You'll be filing a UCC3 termination as to any interest in my client's IP and sending platforms a no-interest letter today. You'll also preserve and produce your communications with Mr. Cole. Loan app, diligence memos, the to-be-assigned note. Silence widened. Then, we can issue a no-interest letter within the hour. UCC3 by morning. As for production, we'll cooperate pursuant to a subpoena. It went out at 4:07 p.m. You've been served, Grace said, already emailing a PDF. Patel exhaled. Understood. Off the record. Our credit team relied on Mr. Cole's statement that transfer was imminent. We don't litigate on fiction. On the record, Grace replied. You'll send a platform-facing letter that names the order, disclaims any lien over ABN marks, site, inventory, domains, and expressly instructs reactivation. No hedging. 30 minutes, Patel said. And Ms. Adebayo, I'm sorry for the disruption. The call clicked off. In the next room, a label printer chirped like a relieved bird. By 6:12 p.m., Abani had the bank's letterhead in her inbox. Northridge Commercial disclaims any security interest, actual or asserted, over ABN Studios' intellectual property, inventory, or receivables. Grace forwarded it to the platforms with the TRO. Green dots surged again. Comments bloomed. Got my shipping notice? Never doubted you. We're still here. At 7:40, a bike courier delivered another Northridge envelope. Thicker, stamped confidential. Grace slid it open. Loan covenants, a collateral schedule, and an internal diligence email chain. 3 screens in, Grace's eyebrows climbed. There, she said, tapping a paragraph. Sponsor proposes adding ABNTM of brand to borrowing base. Assignment forthcoming. See deck slide 17. Below, a redlined note from a bank analyst. Need proof of ownership. Don't want to be in chain of title for influencer drama. Another email, Alex to his banker, landed like a brick. Paper is in motion. I essentially own ABN. It's my wife's hobby brand. We'll file and sweep it in. Timing is sensitive. Pod launch next week. Ms. Joy let out a low whistle. He called your company a hobby to a bank? Good, Grace said. Judges understand contempt better than valuation models. She stacked what mattered. The boast, the to-be-assigned, the analyst's caution ignored. This feeds 3 fires, she said. 1. Prelim injunction, pattern of interference. 2. TTAB, bad faith filing. 3. Divorce, dissipation, marital waste, credibility crater. Abani studied the printouts without blinking. They weren't surprising. They were clarifying. He hadn't just tried to steal, he'd budgeted it. Her phone buzzed again. A voicemail transcribed itself on the lock screen. Alex's podcast voice, all sanded swagger. We protect creators here. Sometimes that means drawing lines with people who piggyback. Silence is complicity. Grace's mouth quirked. He should stop giving us exhibits. She turned to the whiteboard, sketching the next week. Mon, platform restoration complete. 2, bank UCC3 filed. Wedai, affidavit from Patel, Foundation for Business Records. Thu, PI hearing. Under it, she wrote delivery drama and circled it twice. 2 asks before Thursday, Grace said. 1, sworn declaration from Northridge attaching those emails. Patel will balk. Tell her this keeps you out of their crossfire. 2, your own declaration. Clean story, clean paper. Origin of the mark, first use in commerce, screenshots, receipts, tax filings. Judges love an entrepreneur with W-2s and 1099s. Abani opened her manila folder, the quiet ledger of the last 18 months. EIN issuance, first wholesale PO, sales tax returns, a blurry selfie the night she shipped order Nakar Kurasa 201 from a borrowed folding table. I kept everything, she said. I know, Grace said softly. That's why we're winning. At 9:03, Northridge's no-interest letter hit Platform Number 2's council inbox. At 9:17, an engineer flipped the last switch. The storefront's carousel returned. Inventory counts resynced. The customer chat popped. I cried when the site loaded. Don't judge me. Ms. Joy turned the open sign toward the street, though it was well past dark. For luck, she said. They were packing the day's final returns when Grace's phone lit again. Unknown number. Blocked. She declined. A text followed from a new contact. Roth PR Monitoring. We represent brand clients targeted by counterfeiters. We'd like to clear up some miscommunications. Grace read it once, twice. Brand guardians, she muttered. The ones who blast bot takedowns for a fee. Another attachment arrived unbidden. A pitch deck. Logos of platforms. Flowcharts of notice and stay down. A slide titled Case Study, Defending a Creator's Narrative, with Alex's initials blurred, barely. Grace looked at Abani. This is the machine he hired. Abani didn't raise her voice. Then we turn on the lights. Thursday, Grace said, tapping the stack of Northridge emails, the TRO, the manila folder. We don't need speeches. We need receipts. Outside, the deli guy pulled down his gate with a rattle. Inside, Ms. Joy brewed mint tea in a chipped mug someone's aunt had given them at Christmas. The city thinned to a hush. Abani stood in the doorway of the studio and let the quiet coat her. Orders out. Sight up, bank blinking, a plan on the board. Not invincible, but intact. Her phone buzzed one last time. An email from the court. Hearing on preliminary injunction, Thursday, 9 a.m., Part 42. She texted back 2 words to Grace and Ms. Joy both. Let's finish. By morning, the UCC3 termination was live on the Secretary of State's site. Grace took a screenshot, circled the file number, and dropped it into a folder labeled Exhibits PI. Collateral ghosted, Ms. Joy said, reading over her shoulder. Good, Grace replied. Now we prove intent. They turned the studio into a war room. On the corkboard, a timeline in black tape, Alex's hobby email, Roth pitch deck, platform takedowns, bank records, TRO, reactivation. Beneath it, bullet points in Grace's blocky Sharpie. Likelihood of success, priority, continuous use, incontestable domain receipts. Irreparable harm, TMA presumption, plus lost goodwill. Balance of equities, he can podcast, she can't sell. Public interest, consumers don't like fraud. TMA? Abani asked, eyeing the board. Trademark Modernization Act, Grace said. Congress gave us a presumption of irreparable harm once we show likely infringement. Tomorrow, I say those 4 words, and watched the court reporter blink. A chime cut the room. Email from Priya Patel. Subject, declaration, executed. Grace skimmed, nodded. Bank admits the obvious. No lien, reliance on Alex's assignment forthcoming. Analyst flagged risk, credit overrode. It's restrained, but it's foundation. Another ping. This one from Roth PR Monitoring. We stand ready to help de-index defamatory content harming your client's narrative. Attached, a brand protection one-pager festooned with platform logos and a blurred case study that everyone could read anyway. Ms. Joy snorted. They break your window and sell you glass. Grace forwarded the pitch to herself. Subject line Roth, spoliation adjacent. Then she turned to Abani. 2 reps before we sleep, mock direct and mock cross. They sat at the cutting table. The hummingbird of the label printer was their metronome. State your name and role. Abani Adebayo, founder and creative director of ABN Studio. When did you first use ABN in commerce? 18 months ago. Here are the invoices, sales tax filings, screenshots. We shipped order Tukitacho 1 from that table. She tapped the scarred edge and smiled without warmth. What happened last week? Sudden platform takedowns. Customers panicked, thought we were counterfeit. Revenue stopped. We refunded what we couldn't fulfill, overnighted proof to support, answered 2,000 DMs one by one. What's the harm if this continues for even a week? Trust dies in days and takes years to rebuild. People don't forget a counterfeit flag. The algorithm doesn't either. Grace nodded. Perfect. Now cross. She leaned back, changed her tone. Ms. Adebayo, isn't it true you benefited from Mr. Cole's success? He promoted you on his podcast? Never. He mocked women founders on his podcast. We have clips. Isn't ABN just your initials, conveniently similar to Mr. Cole's new venture, ABN Labs? Abani didn't blink. It isn't similar in sight, sound, or meaning, and it's been mine since day one. His deck calls my company a hobby and claims ownership imminent. That's not confusion, that's a plan. Grace dropped the roll. Good. Don't spar, land facts. By midday, the TTAB docket dinged. Alex's applications now marked opposed, expedited. A sterile line on a public page, but it steadied the room like a weight on a kite. At 3:11 p.m., Alex's lawyer emailed a proposal. In the interest of de-escalation, our client is willing to license the ABN mark back to you for a reasonable royalty, contingent on joint control of social channels and a mutual non-disparagement clause covering podcast commentary. Grace didn't laugh. She wrote 2 sentences. No. Your client will withdraw all applications, retract notices, and stipulate to a permanent injunction under Rule 65. We'll talk about fees. Non-disparagement is for people who tell the truth. Send. They took a break at sunset. Ms. Joy brewed mint tea in the chipped world's okayest boss mug. Abani FaceTimed her mother, who didn't ask for legal nuance. She just said, "Wear the jacket with the quiet shoulders." Back in the war room, Grace packed the Redwells. TRO, bank declaration, platform general counsel letters, screenshots, tax returns, the email where Alex called ABN a hobby. On top, she placed the manila folder with a handwritten label. Order 1. Bring this to the stand, she told Abani. Judges like origin stories with receipts. Do they like silence? Abani asked. Only when it means restraint. Grace smiled. You've done that part for 18 months. A final buzz. The court's calendar reminder, preliminary injunction, part 42, 9 a.m. Abani read it once, twice. The words were just words. but she could feel the keel settle. She walked the quiet studio one last time, past the dress that had broken their first 1,000 orders, the bolts of cloth that still smelled like dye and sun, the sewing machine that coughed if you threaded it too fast. She slipped a small, smudged Polaroid into her blazer. Her at that table, night one, a single box on the floor, and a grin nobody saw. Ms. Joy flicked off the lights. The board glowed in the street's sodium haze. Delivery drama. Under it, Grace had added a smaller line in pen. Tell the truth. Show the paper. Sit down. See you in part 42. Ab. They queued at the magnetometers with contractors and jurors and a man carrying a box of pastries big enough to swing an election. Grace held 2 Redwells, Ms. Joy a laptop bag and a roll of painter's tape, and Abani wore the jacket with the quiet shoulders. No one spoke on the elevator. Floor 22 chimed like a metronome. Part 42 was half walnut, half fluorescent. Council tables faced a bench polished by 1,000 elbows. In the gallery, 3 reporters, a podcast producer in a varsity cap, and 2 women who looked like they'd taken PTO to watch someone like them win something that mattered. Alex was already there. New suit, old grin. His lawyer, crisp, coastal, the kind who bills in 6-minute increments, rose the moment Grace walked in. Your Honor, if we could address scheduling— Sit, counsel, the judge said, not looking up. We'll start with the motion that stops money from bleeding. Plaintiff? Grace stood, slid the TRO PI binder onto the lectern, and clicked a small, battered timer she'd brought from home. It ticked softly, a private promise to herself to be surgical. Good morning, Judge. We're here because my client's brand, ABN, was erased from the internet last week using fraudulent paperwork and a pair of trademark applications filed in bad faith. Under the Trademark Modernization Act, once we show a likelihood of success, irreparable harm is presumed. We have both. She handed up Exhibit 1, the 2 USPTO filings for ABN Labs and ABN with Alex's name in block letters. Filed 6 days after he emailed investors that my client's company was a hobby he planned to roll up. Exhibit 2 is that email. The judge skimmed, eyes moving like a scanner. Next, Grace said. Platform takedowns, flagging ABN as counterfeit on the strength of these applications and a non-existent lien. Exhibit 3 is our UCC search. Exhibit 4 is the UCC-3 termination the bank filed yesterday, when it realized there was never collateral to begin with. Exhibit 5 is the bank's declaration. The judge read the last one longer. Ms. Patel admits they extended credit in anticipation of an assignment that never occurred. Not great. Not for them, Grace said, and catastrophic for my client. Sales dropped to 0. Customers saw counterfeit in red. You can't algorithmically unring that bell. And under TMA, we don't have to prove it with smoke and mirrors. Witness, the judge said. Abani took the stand. The oath felt simple after the year she'd had. Name and role, Grace began. Abani Adebayo, founder and creative director of ABN Studio. First sale under ABN? She reached into the manila folder, hands steady. Order, Mamao 1, invoice, shipping label, sales tax paid, night 1 from my kitchen table. It passed to the bench like a relic. The judge looked at the date, then at Abani. What happened last week? Our stores vanished. Our social handles went gray. People DM'd, "Are you fake?" We refunded what we couldn't ship. We spent 72 hours fighting smoke. What's the harm if this continues? Trust. You can buy ads. You can't buy back trust. Grace nodded. No further questions. Defense counsel rose, smile engineered for juries and brunch. Ms. Adebayo, isn't it true you benefited from Mr. Cole's success? No. He promoted you on his podcast, did he not? We have clips of him mocking women founders. I can play them. Isn't ABN just your initials? Confusingly similar to ABN Labs? It's the initials of my name, used 18 months before his filings. His deck calls my company a hobby and claims ownership imminent. That's not confusion. That is intent. Counsel's smile thinned. No further questions. The judge leaned forward. Defense? He launched. Your Honor, my client merely sought to stabilize a co-branded venture. Stop, the judge said. Show me a signed assignment, a license, a cap table with her name off it, anything that puts rights in your client's hands. A beat. Papers shuffled to buy a miracle. None arrived. Right, the judge said. Argument? Grace's timer ticked on. Likelihood of success? We have priority, continuous use, and their applications admit she exists while pretending they own her. Irreparable harm is presumed under TMA. Balance of equities? He can keep talking. She can't sell if he keeps flipping switches. Public interest favors not lying to consumers with counterfeit labels. Defense tried reputation triage. We propose a license back, joint control of channels, and mutual non-disparagement. Counsel, the judge said. You cannot set a house on fire and then sell the hydrant. A low murmur rolled the gallery. The judge didn't smile. Court's ruling, she said, sliding the stack into order. Preliminary injunction is granted. Defendants and those acting in concert with them are enjoined from 1. Using the ABN mark, 2. Filing or maintaining applications for that mark, 3. Submitting any takedown, enforcement, or brand protection request related to ABN. You will, within 24 hours, retract all notices to platforms and payment processors and notify USPTO you're withdrawing the applications. She looked to her clerk. Prepare platform notice orders to Meta, Shopify, TikTok, Amazon, Stripe, PayPal, and Google. Direct reactivation within 24 hours on presentation of this order. If they want to be heard, they can move, but the lights go back on now. Defense started to object. The judge lifted a palm. Spoliation. You will preserve everything. I want a forensic image of your client's laptop and phone in 7 days. No wiping, no archive cleanups, no PR firms optimizing anything. Fees are reserved. Sanctions are available. She turned back to Abani. Ms. Adebayo, you built something and someone tried to take it with paperwork. That is not a close call. Delivery beats drama. You may step down. The gavel didn't fall. Part 42 used a pen tap. It sounded louder. Outside, the hallway coughed up reporters and a camera on a gimbal. Grace angled them to the side wall where an old bronze seal made a good backdrop. Statement? Someone asked. Grace kept it short. We're grateful the court saw the facts. If you've got a brand and someone files first with lies, the law still protects you. That's it. Alex brushed past, jaw tight, mic chasing. This is a gag order on free speech, he said, already rehearsing his cold open. Grace paused just long enough. It's a stop order on false commercial speech. He can talk. He cannot impersonate. Down on the steps, Ms. Joy checked her phone. Shopify flipped. Stripe 2. IG is reviewing court order. A breath Abani hadn't realized she was holding left her lungs like a tide. The city sounded different. Or maybe she did. They walked 2 blocks to a diner that smelled like butter and Old Victory. Ms. Joy ordered pancakes. Grace drank coffee like a deposition transcript. Steady, relentless. What now? Abani asked. Now we work, Grace said. Fulfill what you can, over-communicate, pin the court order, clean the search results with truth, not spin. We'll push for a permanent injunction and fees. TTAB keeps their apps in a graveyard. If he slips, we file contempt. Ms. Joy slid her a phone. ABN's grid had blinked from gray to color mid-sentence. Comments stacked like dominoes. She's back. We never left you. Counterfeit? I don't think so. A DM floated to the top. From a buyer she'd dreamed of since the kitchen table. Court order noted. When you're stable, let's talk wholesale. Abani's eyes stung. She typed soon, deleted it. Typed when we can deliver, hit send. Grace wiped a crumb from a page of her legal pad and wrote a new list. Ship the backlog, publish the timeline, thank your customers. Sleep at the bottom, she added, smaller, like a footnote to the universe. Quiet is not silence. Quiet is control. Back at the studio, Ms. Joy taped the stamped order to the corkboard under delivery drama. Below it, the Polaroid of order. 1. The room hummed. Printers, packing tape, the laugh sob of a team that got to go back to doing the only thing that ever really mattered. The jacket with the quiet shoulders went on a hook. The machine that coughed if you threaded it too fast coughed and then purred. The first label of the day printed, around 14,872. Let's go, Abani said. Let's deliver, Ms. Joy said. Grace, already dialing the TTAB clerk, pointed at the board without looking up. Say it with me. All three, together, like a vow they'd earned. Tell the truth. Show the paper. Sit down. The order on the corkboard was still damp around the stamp when the dashboards blinked awake for real. Shopify's paused banner slid off like a scab. Stripe reconnected its arteries. Instagram unfroze the grid, color returning cell by cell. Cart queue's filling, Ms. Joy called from the mezzanine. If this keeps up, we'll drown in love by noon. Then we learn to swim, Abani said, tying her hair and stepping into the hum. They had a plan on the whiteboard. Ship, speak, stabilize. Step 1 meant folding tables in the loading bay, barcodes like rosary beads, and 3 borrowed college kids scanning labels at a dead sprint. Step 2 meant a letter pinned everywhere. Site, socials, order confirmations, 4 paragraphs, no adjectives, the judge's order linked in line 2. Step 3 meant calling every supplier they'd ever paid on time and asking for a week of grace and a month of faith. They took the call from Crescent & Co. in the office that used to be a closet. Crescent's buyer, measured Midwestern, had DM'd after the injunction. We love the line, the buyer said, but our counsel's twitchy. Can you send the order and the first use proof? Grace slid the PDF across the table like a poker chip. Already in your inbox, along with a 1-page timeline. Also, we'll over-deliver on margins for your first capsule. Call it a re-entry special. Silence, then a laugh. Straight to math. I like you. We'll start with 30 stores. Net 30, not 60. When the call ended, Ms. Joy held her palm out like a coach. They stacked hands and knocked the corkboard. Delivery drama. The pendulum swung back hard. Alex pushed a truth thread at 10:58, video lit like a talk show, voice honeyed with grievance, co-founded brand, misled courts, chilling my speech. A chorus of rented blue-check accounts amplified him. A brand protection vendor, new name, same template, fired off counterfeit flags to 2 platforms the order hadn't yet touched. Ms. Joy's inbox pinged with the receipts no one expects influencers to save. A PR brief titled ABN Takedown V2 and a Slack export from the vendor with a line that made Grace look up fast. We are covered. His apps are live. Fire at will. Grace didn't smile. Acting in concert means the umbrella covers the rain. Print it, we go back. Emergency conference. Same courtroom, same pen tap instead of gavel. Counsel, the judge said. My order enjoined your client and those acting in concert. These platform notices went out 2 hours ago from a firm you retained yesterday. Why shouldn't I find contempt? Defense tried new words for old smoke. Independent contractor, misunderstanding. Grace slid the PR brief to the deputy. V2. Fire at will. The will appears to be this court's order. The judge let the silence do its work. Contempt is found. Sanction is $50,000 per day per violation. Retroactive to this morning at 11. Corrective notices go out now. And you, she pointed with the pen, not at counsel but at the problem, will post on the same channels you used to defame that the takedowns were improper and have been withdrawn. Exact language to be approved by plaintiff. You may appeal after you comply. Alex swallowed whatever line his PR deck had cued. The pen tapped once. It sounded like a vault closing. Back at the studio, they taped contempt order beneath the injunction. The team didn't cheer. They exhaled and kept packing. Abani stood in the doorway between creation and logistics, the cutting table where patterns looked like islands, the loading dock where boxes became migration. She picked up a Sharpie and a stack of thank you cards. To everyone who stuck through the gray screen, she wrote, one card after another, hand cramping, voice steady on paper. We'll earn your trust again the old way. One piece on time. A playlist shuffled to the song she used to loop at 2 a.m. when the brand was only a folder on a used laptop. She let it play. The muscle memory of starting saved her from the dizziness of being seen. They launched a small, deliberate thing. Mute, a capsule that said the quiet part loud. A clean blazer with hidden inside pockets labeled paper, keys, peace. A silk scarf printed with the first invoice's timestamp. A tee that read, Quiet is control in thread, the color of court-ordered ink. Limit the run, Ms. Joy warned. Scarcity feels like truth. Hype feels like him. It sold out in 8 minutes without a single ad buy. A text from a number Grace didn't recognize buzzed while she was writing a meet and confer that did everything but meet or confer. Essence. We're closing a feature on women who built in silence. Would your founder talk? She will, Grace replied, then looked at Abani. On your terms, not revenge, not a clapback, a build. My mother, Abani said, eyes on the cutting table, used to tell me if you so angry, you snag the lining, let's not snag. Warehouse quiet, city base far away. The last pallet of the day wrapped like a promise. Ms. Joy updated the board counts. Backlog, 482, returns, 9, goodwill codes issued, plus 311. Someone had taped a printout of the platform notice order like a talisman to the inside of the bay door. Grace packed up her legal pad. Permanent injunction hearing in 6 weeks. We'll run depositions the way you run this floor. Clean lines, no flourishes. Also, their GC just hired criminal counsel. For him? Ms. Joy asked. For the bank, Grace said. Paper has a smell when it's been washed. DOJ can smell. Abani looked at the pallet jack, at the label printer, at the hand-lettered sign that had survived every move. Tell the truth. Show the paper. Sit down. She had written it first to quiet herself. Now it quieted rooms. Go home, she told the team, or stay and dance, but clock out either way. When the door finally rolled down, she lingered by the jacket with the quiet shoulders, fingers on the seam she'd re-sewn the day she heard the word counterfeit applied to her own name. She didn't think triumph. She thought Thursday's ship window. She thought about sewing angry. Outside, a wind moved through the alley, carrying bakery sugar and bus diesel and the metallic aftertaste of rain. Inside, the label printer coughed and then purred. One last time. The number rolled out, warm as a heartbeat. They turned the sample room into a war room. Pattern hooks held red welds. Mannequins wore lanyards that said exhibit. Grace drew 3 boxes on the whiteboard: jurisdiction, control, damages, and circled control twice. Rule 1, she told Abani, handing her a bottle of water. Answer the question asked. No tours, no adjectives. Abani nodded. She wasn't nervous, just steady. She had shipped in storms. She could sit in a chair and tell the truth. The court reporter swore them in. Alex wore a Navy suit calibrated to signal contrition without poverty. His lawyer tried to set the tone. Let's keep this professional, counsel said. Grace smiled. I always do. She slid Exhibit 12 across the table, the vendor slack with fire at will highlighted. Mr. Klein, who retained Brandshield Partners? Our agency. And who approved this instruction, fire at will, the morning the injunction issued? He hesitated. My comms director. Grace tapped the signature block on an email chain. Approved, AK. Your initials? He swallowed. Yes. So you controlled the takedowns? Counsel, objection. Overruled at depot. The reporter reminded gently. Alex exhaled. Yes. Exhibit 21 was a wire detail. Funds moving from Klein IP LLC to a Gibraltar sub of the vendor, memo line monitoring. Is this your signature? Yes. And these funds came from your personal line of credit secured by marital assets? Grace asked, not looking up. Silence. Then, yes. Thank you. His lawyer called a break. In the hall, she tried the old song in a new key. Our client is prepared to discuss a global resolution. Permanent injunction with teeth, corrective statements on every platform he used, fee shifting, and a contempt purge plan, Grace said. Then we can discuss money. That's ambitious. It's the floor. Defense tried to paint ABN as a joint venture in disguise. Isn't it true Mr. Klein advised you on brand strategy? He suggested I post more selfies, Abani said evenly. I declined. They shifted to the origin story. When did you first use ABN Studio in Commerce? 18 months before the marriage ended. Here are the invoices and first use screenshots. She placed the folder like a ruler on a crooked line. They probed for anger. Do you want to ruin Mr. Klein? I want to work, she said. And for him to stop lying. The reporter didn't smile, but her eyes softened. Back at the studio, Ms. Joy walked with a forensic accountant, Tasha, through a spreadsheet forest. This column? Tasha asked. Chargebacks from the sham notices, Ms. Joy said. We comped, then won most back. Tasha nodded. Your paper is clean. Their paper smells. She held up a bank report. Multiple suspicious activity flags tied to that Gibraltar conduit. DOJ served a subpoena on the vendor yesterday. If they flip, your contempt becomes a roadmap. Grace texted from the elevator. He admitted control. We're filing for a permanent. Ms. Joy thumbed back a single word. Run. The Essence feature went live. The storm you didn't hear. How ABN built in quiet. No gossip. No X. 4 photos. Her mother's thimble on a work table, a rack of finished blazers, a shot of the loading dock at golden hour. Abani's hands tying a hang tag that read, Quiet is control. A paragraph near the end. ABN Fellowship will fund 100 microgrants for women building at night. No pitch decks, just proofs of work. The application link pinged the inbox like rain on a roof. Abani read it once and closed her phone. "Ship first," she said, and signed 24 thank you cards. Crescent and Comis doubled their order. A buyer in Seoul asked to pilot a pop-up. A boutique in Detroit sent a voice memo. "Your blazer stopped a room. We want in." Musum. Joy built a fair allocation grid on a legal pad and then made the spreadsheet match the pad, not the other way around. In the same hour, Alex posted a video titled, "My Truth, Part 2. Comments were different this time. Fewer claps, more links to the contempt order. One line floated to the top, "Apologize," then stop talking. Grace filed a motion stack thick enough to chalk a door. Permanent injunction, declaratory relief, fees, sanctions. Attached, emails, wires, vendor contracts, the Slack with the phrase no one in PR school should ever type. The judge set a 2-day evidentiary hearing. Defense quietly swapped out their PR firm for a crisis shop that specialized in unringing bells. It didn't help. You can't spin a PDF. Abani unlocked the tiny back studio where the first bolts had lived. The thimble lay where she left it, cool as a coin. She threaded a needle and ran a line on a sample jacket's inside seam, steady even, not angry. She drafted a letter to herself instead of to him. Do not sew to prove anything. Sew to make something. Deliver on Thursdays, pay on time, hire well, keep the floor clean, keep your name clean, tell the truth, show the paper, sit down. She pinned it above the cutting mat. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, the machines were still. Her phone buzzed once. A text from Grace. "Sleep. We've got the record." Another from Ms. Joy, 6:30 call. "Coffee's on me." She smiled, turned off the light, and locked the door. The chapter didn't end with a clapback or a pose, but with a list and a seam. Quiet daylight sewn into the dark. Part 66, Day 1, 9:02 a.m. 2 easels waited by counsel table, each holding a blown-up Slack screenshot. Grace tapped the corner of Exhibit 31, "Fire at Will," and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, this isn't PR, it's control. We're here for a permanent injunction, sanctions, and a purge plan that actually stops the harm." Across the aisle, Alex sat rigid, jaw set. His new crisis lawyer spoke softly about misunderstandings and overzealous vendors. The judge glanced over her glasses. "Misunderstandings don't wire money." Part 67, 10:42 a.m. The vendor's account manager took the stand, palms damp. Grace's first 3 questions were housekeeping. The 4th landed. "Who told you to proceed after the TRO?" He swallowed. "Klein's team. Specifically, Mr. Klein approved the queue." "Approved how?" "Email, then Slack." He typed, "Fire at Will." "Directed at competitor URLs that matched ABN Studio purchase confirmations?" "Yes." On the screen, timestamps lined up with ABN's chargebacks like railroad ties. Part 68, 1:15 p.m. A neurologist could have diagrammed Alex's micro-flinches. The judge noticed the big ones. Defense tried to rehabilitate with phrases like industry standard and brand protection drift. Grace objected once. Asked and answered by the PDF. Sustained. Then Tasha, the forensic accountant, laid out the conduit. Klein IP LLC, Gibraltar Sub, vendor. Memo lines, monitoring, urgent takedown, post-TRO corrective. The last one drew a sigh from the bench. "Corrective?" the judge said. "It corrected what exactly?" "Traffic," Tasha answered. "From ABN to Mr. Klein's own look-alike landing pages." Part 69, 3:03 p.m. Abani testified without ornament. Why are you here, Ms. Adeyemi? To keep working under my own name. Do you want money from Mr. Klein? I want him to stop. If the court awards fees because my team did the work, we'll use them to cover the costs of the harm and keep shipping. She never raised her voice. The courtroom leaned forward anyway. Part 70, 4:47 p.m. Defense put Alex on. He tried contrition. I regret the tone of a few messages. Vendors took things too far. Grace didn't blink. You were the vendor. No. I retained the vendor. You funded, directed, and reviewed the vendor. That makes you what, Mr. Klein? Silence. Answer. He stared at the screen where his initials lived on approvals. Responsible. Part 71. Day 2, 9:30 a.m. Closing was clean. Permanent injunctions require likelihood of success, irreparable harm, balance of equities, public interest, Grace said, drawing 4 check marks. We've proved all 4. We also ask for a tailored purge, pinned corrective statements on every channel that carried the false narrative, notice to retail partners, audit rights, and a contempt trigger if any proxy repeats the conduct. Defense argued overbreadth. The judge lifted a copy of the TRO. Overbreadth is when the court can't see where the conduct ends. Here, Ms. Park gave me a map. Part 72, 2:11 p.m., the order. The judge read slowly, so each word landed. Permanent injunction granted. Defendant and those acting in concert are enjoined from any removal, reporting, shadow banning, or disparagement of ABN studio marks, channels, and partners. Within 10 days, defendant shall 1. Post corrective statements, pinned for 90 days, on all platforms where prior statements or takedowns occurred. 2. Notify the vendor network and any agencies of record of this order and provide proof of receipt. 3. Fund an independent monitor for 6 months. 4. Pay plaintiffs reasonable fees and costs. 5. Pay coercive sanctions of $10,000 per day for any violation proven by the monitor. She paused, then added what no PR shop could spin. Defendant's apology is not the remedy. Compliance is. Gavel. A murmured wow from the gallery. Alex stared at the table grain like it could open. Part 73, 4:05 p.m., the walkout. In the corridor, cameras waited. Grace kept them moving. Statement, someone shouted. Read the order, she said. Then read the labels. Abani squeezed Ms. Joy's hand. Back to work? Back to work, Ms. Joy said. We ship on Thursdays. Part 74, 7:22 p.m., studio night. The inbox filled with PO updates, not pity. Crescent bumped quantities but held the dates. Seoul asked for a modest push to get fit right. Detroit sent a photo of a customer smiling in a mirror with the caption, Quiet is control. Abani drafted a note to the fellowship list. We said micro grants. We meant it. First 25 go out Friday. Keep receipts. Keep going. She taped the judge's 4 checkbox list under the studio clock. Beneath it, she wrote 2 more lines. Deliver clean. Don't gloat. Part 75, 10:03 p.m., the Post. He had to pin on Alex's profile. A square appeared with black text on white. Lawyered, spare, unavoidable. A court has found my prior statements and actions concerning ABN Studio false and unlawful. I am required to correct the record and cease any interference with ABN Studio's business. I will comply with the court's order. Comments flooded in. Not claps, not hate. Mostly links to the order, to ABN, to seam lines. Part 76, 11:11 p.m., the quiet win, no champagne. No victory lap. The team stacked cartons, printed pick lists, booked carriers. Grace texted a photo of a stamped copy of the order. Ms. Dorofschoner. Joy replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a UPS tracking number. Abani stood by the cutting mat, reading her pinned note again. Do not sew to prove anything, sew to make something. She threaded the machine. Daylight waited in the next room, and Chapter 12 could take its time finding it. Part 77, plus 130 days, 8:12 a.m., monitor's email subject. Client compliance, week 4. All corrective posts still pinned. Vendor network acknowledged receipt. Queues disabled. Takedown appeals resolved. ABN channels restored. False flags reversed. No new incidents detected across 27 platforms. Grace forwarded it with a single line. We keep receipts. Abani starred the message and went back to the cutting table. Part 78, 6:01 a.m., studio light. The sun slid across the bolts like a slow brushstroke. Ms. Joy wheeled the rack into place, a post-it on the top hanger. Drop, quiet, storm. Names stitched in the waistbands. Begin, breathe, return, stay, unfold. Tasha taped the pick list by Bay 3 and flipped the breaker for the label printer. Today's the first Friday without triage, Ms. Joy said. Then it's just work, Abani answered, and smiled. Part 79, noon. The courtyard pop-up, 25 folding tables, 25 tiny empires. The fellowship grantees set out soaps, ceramics, zines, teas. A girl with blue braids sold candles poured in thrifted teacups. A retiree held up her first batch of linen aprons and said, I haven't been this nervous since my wedding. Crescent sent buyers quietly, no clipboards, just hands on seams and questions about lead times. The point wasn't a headline. It was invoices. Part 80, 3:40 p.m., the call you return unknown number. Abani almost let it die, then swiped. Ms. Adiemi? This is Morales, the court-appointed monitor. Unusual note. Mr. Klein's counsel asked to confirm an early audit. Says he wants to get it over with. Schedule it, Abani said. We'll pour coffee. She hung up. For the first time, the name didn't spike her pulse. Not forgiveness, not fixation, just distance. Part 81, 5:15 p.m. The show that isn't no runway, no step and repeat. Just a taped rectangle on the warehouse floor and a playlist the interns built. Customers and neighbors lined the perimeter. When the first model rounded the corner and began, the room went still. Clean lines, quiet pockets, a hem that caught the light like breath. Midway through, Isabel, fellowship grantee, Rovo 7, came out with her cane, wearing return. The applause wasn't loud. It was long. At the end, there was no bow. Abani lifted a hand from the loading dock and mouthed, Thank you, that was enough. Part 82, 7:52 p.m. 2 messages, Grace, monitor cleared, fees motion granted. I'll send numbers Monday. Go rest. Soul, fit approved, adding 200 units to stay, congrats. Miss Joy read over her shoulder. We should get more tape. We should, Abani said, and more chairs. Part 83, 9:30 p.m. The note in the box, every parcel in the night cycle got a card. If you've ever been talked over, minimized, or erased, this label is for you. It doesn't make you whole. You already are. It's just a reminder you can wear. ABN Studio on the back, a line from the studio wall. Do not sew to prove anything. Sew to make something. Part 84, plus 160 days, 10:04 a.m., the audit. The monitor walked the floor with a clipboard. Klein's counsel trailed, silent. Abani pointed to the order taped by the clock, the 4 checkboxes bright from fingerprints. Labels ran, steam hissed. A grantee in the corner counted change out loud, steady, precise. Anything further? The monitor asked. No, counsel said. We're done. Good, Abani replied. We were working. Part 85, 6:03 p.m. Small math numbers no one else would frame. Chargebacks reversed. 413. Folks who wrote "Found You Again." 122. Micro grants funded to date. 50. PO lines shipped on time since the order. All Tasha slid the page across. "It's not viral," she said. "It's vital." Part 86, 11:57 p.m. Lockup. The last carton kissed the truck floor. Ms. Joy pulled the door and slapped the side twice, and the driver saluted like it was ritual, because now it was. Grace texted a photo of tacos in a paper bag. "Left on your desk. Lawyer tax." Abani stood under the buzzing exit sign. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was chosen. Part 87, Dawn. Again she arrived before anyone, set the shears on the mat, and taped a new note beneath the judge's list. Quiet is not absence. Quiet is control. Outside, delivery brakes sighed. Inside, fabric waited, obedient and infinite. She smoothed the first length flat, drew the line, and cut. Not to prove, to make, to keep making.